Most people spend their entire working lives chasing a number without knowing what that number actually does when they reach it. They know what $1 million sounds like. They have seen it in movies, heard it in songs, used it as a punchline and a daydream for as long as they can remember. What they do not know, because almost nobody talks about it honestly, is what changes structurally. Psychologically and mathematically, the moment your net worth crosses 7 figures. And the answer is not what most people expect. Some of it is better, some of it is stranger. And one part of it is something that genuinely catches almost everyone off guard. Let's start with the math, because the math is where the real shift begins, and it is more dramatic than people realize until they see it written out. At $100,000 invested at a 10% annual return, your portfolio generates $10,000 a year in growth. That is real money, but it is not life-changing money. You are still entirely dependent on your income. At $500,000 at the same return, you are generating $50,000 a year in growth. Getting closer, but you still need your job. At $1 million at 10%, your portfolio generates $100,000 a year in growth. The median household income in the United States is around $80,000. Your money is now earning more per year than most American families bring home. You have crossed the line where your assets are doing more work than you are. That is not a feeling. That is arithmetic. And it is the reason $1 million is the number people fixate on, because it is roughly the point where, historically, money becomes self-sustaining at a middle-class standard of living. The rule most financial planners use is called the 4% safe withdrawal rate. The research behind it, originally published in 1994 by financial planner William Bingen and later expanded by the Trinity study, found that a portfolio invested in a mix of stocks and bonds could sustain a 4% annual withdrawal indefinitely across every 30-year period in American market history, including the periods containing the Great Depression, the 1970s stagflation, the dot-com crash, and 2008. 4% of $1 million is $40,000 a year. That is not a lavish retirement, but it is money that keeps coming without you doing anything for as long as you live, without depleting the principal in any historical scenario. At $1,500,000, the same rule produces $60,000 a year. At $2 million, it produces $80,000, which is above the median household income in America. The math around $1 million is not theoretical. It is the threshold where financial independence stops being a concept and starts being a calculation. Now here is where it gets more interesting and more complicated than the math alone suggests. The first thing that changes when you hit $1 million is your relationship with work, not your relationship with your job. Your relationship with work itself. Before $1 million, most people are working because they have to. The mortgage is due. The car payment comes out Friday. The health insurance is tied to the employer. Every month, there is a list of obligations that requires a paycheck, and the paycheck requires showing up. After $1 million invested, that chain does not disappear overnight. But it loosens in a way that changes every single conversation you have about your career. You can negotiate differently because walking away is now survivable. You can take a pay cut for a job you actually want without it being financially reckless. You can start a business, take a sabbatical, or say no to a bad situation without the immediate terror of what happens next month. The money has not retired you. It has given you leverage. And leverage changes behavior in ways that compound just like interest does. A study from the National Bureau of Economic Research found that financial security, defined roughly as having enough assets to survive job loss without lifestyle collapse, is one of the strongest predictors of career satisfaction and long-term income growth. The reason is counterintuitive, but makes sense once you see it. People with financial cushion take more calculated risks. They ask for more. They leave bad situations faster. They negotiate harder. They pursue opportunities that look uncertain from the outside, but are calculated from the inside. The $1 million does not just generate $100,000 a year in investment returns. It changes the decisions that generate your earned income too. That compounding effect on behavior is something most wealth discussions completely skip. The second thing that changes is your relationship with money itself, and this one genuinely surprises people. Most people assume that having more money makes you less stressed about money. That is true up to a point, and then it stops being the whole story. A 2010 study from Princeton, conducted by economists Angus Deaton and Daniel Kahneman, found that emotional well-being increases with income up to around $75,000 a year at the time of the study, after which additional income has diminishing returns on day-to-day happiness. A more recent 2021 study from Matthew Killingsworth at Wharton found the relationship continues beyond that point, but flattens significantly. What both studies agree on is that the anxiety reduction from money is front-loaded. Going from $0 to $100,000 in net worth reduces financial stress more than going from $900,000 to $1 million. By the time you reach seven figures, the acute financial anxiety that most people live with, the one that wakes you up at 2 a.m. when the furnace makes a new sound, is largely gone. What replaces it is different and worth understanding. What replaces it for most people at $1 million is a new and unexpected kind of vigilance, because now there is something real to lose. A person with $12,000 in savings who makes a bad investment decision loses $12,000. A person with $1 million who makes a bad decision in the wrong market environment can lose $200,000 in a correction that the broader market recovers from in 18 months. The math works out fine over time. But $200,000 feels different than $12,000 even when the percentage is the same. Behavioral economists call this loss aversion, and research consistently shows that losses hurt roughly twice as much psychologically as equivalent gains feel good. At $1 million, the absolute size of potential losses is large enough that loss aversion becomes a real risk to your strategy. People who were disciplined index fund investors at $200,000 sometimes become anxious market timers at $1. 000,000, because now the number on the screen feels real in a way it did not before. This is one of the reasons portfolios sometimes underperform in the final stretch before and after significant wealth milestones. The psychology of protecting what you have starts competing with the mathematics of continuing to grow it. The third change is social, and almost nobody talks about it honestly. Money changes relationships, not always dramatically, not always badly, but it changes them. When your net worth crosses $1 million, the gap between your financial reality and the financial reality of most people around you is no longer abstract. The median net worth for Americans between 45 and 54 is around $247,000 if you have reached $1 million. You have roughly 4 times the median wealth for your age group. That gap shows up in conversations about vacations you can actually afford, about home purchases that are options for you and dreams for others, about job decisions you can make that most people cannot. You do not have to say anything for this to create friction. People sense it. And the way you handle that gap, whether you are transparent about it, quiet about it, or thoughtful about it, shapes your relationships in ways you will not fully see until you are in it. There is also the question of who you trust. At $1 million in net worth, you become meaningfully interesting to a financial services industry that has historically not served ordinary investors particularly well. Wealth managers will call, estate attorneys will suggest meetings, financial products designed to generate fees will present themselves as solutions to problems you did not know you had. The noise around your money increases at the exact moment that the cost of bad decisions increases. One of the consistent findings from research on high net worth investors is that more active management, meaning more products, more complexity, more advisor involvement, tends to produce lower returns net of fees than a simple, low-cost index fund strategy. The irony is that the more money you have, the more people will try to convince you that simplicity is too simple for someone in your position. It usually is not. The fourth change is the most counterintuitive one and the one that takes the longest to understand. When you hit $1 million, the primary variable in your wealth equation shifts. Below $1 million, your savings rate is the most important number. How much you earn minus how much you spend determines how fast you get there. Above $1 million, your savings rate matters less because the compounding on the existing base starts to dominate the equation. At $1 million growing at 10%, the market adds $100,000 in year one. You would have to save $8,333 a month just to match what the portfolio does automatically. Most people cannot save at that rate, which means the primary job after $1 million is not adding more money. It is not destroying what is already there. Staying invested through corrections. Not panic selling in 2022 when the market dropped 20%. Not rotating out of index funds into something a podcast convinced you was smarter. The single most important financial skill below $1 million is discipline in saving. The single most important financial skill above $1 million is discipline in doing nothing. That is a harder skill than it sounds, because doing nothing when a number that took you 20 years to build drops by $180. 000 in 3 months feels irresponsible. It feels like you should act. Every instinct you have built around solving problems and taking action works against you. The market does not care about your instincts. The historical data is unambiguous. Investors who stayed fully invested through every major correction in the last 50 years dramatically outperformed investors who moved to cash at any point during those corrections and then tried to get back in. Time in the market has beaten timing the market every single time across every measured period. At $1 million, that lesson stops being theoretical and starts costing or making you six figures depending on whether you follow it. Here is the thing about $1 million that nobody puts in the title of the video because it does not make for a satisfying headline. Reaching it does not change how you feel about yourself as much as you expect it to. The research on hedonic adaptation, the human tendency to return to a baseline level of happiness after major life events, is consistent and depressing. Lottery winners return to their baseline happiness level within a year. People who receive unexpected inheritances adapt. The number in your brokerage account does not permanently elevate your sense of self-worth or security the way you imagine it will from the outside looking in. What it does do, if you let it, is change what you are optimizing for. Before $1 million, most people are optimizing for accumulation. Get the number higher. Save more. Earn more. Invest more. After $1 million, the people who seem to navigate it best shift to optimizing for something different. Time. Specifically, what they do with their time and how much of it is spent on things they would choose versus things they are obligated to do. The money did not buy them happiness. It bought them the option to structure their days differently. And that option, exercised well, is what actually changes the quality of life that wealth is supposed to produce. The $1 million does not arrive with a manual. Nobody sits you down and explains that the skills that got you there are not the same skills that protect it, that the psychology that worked in the accumulation phase can work against you in the preservation phase, that relationships will shift in ways you did not budget for, and that the most important thing you can do with 7 figures is usually the hardest thing for a driven person to accept, which is to leave it alone and let time finish the job that discipline started. Now you know. Most people figure it out after the fact. You get to think about it before.